So I have regular visits with some understandably grouchy kiddos as a chaplain at Children's Hospital. Now, like most kids, they also have their spurts of playfulness and silliness, albeit infrequently. However, unlike other children, many of them, unfortunately, concern themselves less with the antics of Paw Patrol or the potential of Play-Doh than with the daily routines of an intensive care unit. Bless you. I remember one visit at the beginning of my residency. I was leaning over a bed with a toy, and a nurse motioned to a machine at the foot of the bed. Be very careful, she cautioned. That machine is keeping them alive. These kiddos, they're often connected to medical devices, rendering them unable to leave their rooms as they await life-saving procedures. Now, it is more than likely to make up for this complete lack of privacy and control and bodily autonomy that define every aspect of their existence in the hospital and leave them dependent upon others for their every need, that these kiddos often develop a guarded attitude that comes across as grouchy. They have every right. For one particularly grouchy patient I knew for a while, awaiting an organ transplant, I found out there was really only one thing that could win them over: Cheetos. Yes. And to say they love Cheetos would be a gross understatement. Gross, meaning Cheetos. But anyway, so when this kiddo successfully received their donor organ, I scored some Cheetos, and I was so excited to bring them to celebrate the successful procedure and their new freedom. And when they saw me approach, my Cheetos offering in hand, their expression morphed into one of just utter enchantment. I mean, they took the Cheetos and they paused, and likely for the first time since I met them, which had been a while, they looked directly at me, and they said with the supreme sincerity of someone truly and deeply grateful, "I love you," which, as you can tell, I received with my own depth of gratitude and fulfillment, one for which I was completely unprepared. I realized in that moment not just how much I appreciated that simple statement of love, but just how much I needed it. When people find out I'm a chaplain at Children's Hospital, I often hear things like, "That's wonderful. How do you do that? I couldn't do that. It's wonderful work. Thank you." And I am proud that I'm doing valuable work. But when I consider the reward of love that work brings, I also feel like quite a selfish person. Yes, I am witness to some very difficult things. The work is challenging in many ways. But I get love as good or better than I give. Finding that Cheetos of love, that one thing that frees an entombed soul from spiritual pain, is beyond rewarding. Chaplaincy. Chaplaincy and even ministry is often labeled pastoral. Pastor meaning shepherd, essentially. And it would seem the chaplain or the minister is the shepherd. who provides the care and the helpless patient, or the congregant searching for spiritual sustenance is the care receiver, the sheep. But this relationship, this framing, is troubling because it assumes and establishes a hierarchical power differential that isn't there. In reality, I too got the love I needed in that hospital room. I got the spiritual food I require to survive and thrive in. I told this story not to illustrate the helplessness of the patient dependent upon me for spiritual care. I told it to highlight what I often overlook, which is the dependence of me, the person in the supposed shepherd role, for the love that gives life meaning and purpose. I realized that in my countless moments of neutral or even lately deflated spirit accompanying the routine circumstances of my quotidian existence, or confronting the realities of a far from ideal world, in those countless moments, I don't just crave, but I depend on life-giving moments of honest, loving connection with another person. W.E.B. Du Bois eloquently sums up this lesson by warning that just as some of us need love because we are literally trapped, like this child in the hospital, we all can become entombed souls, that's his term, in our own spheres of self-imposed captivity that hinders our own liberation, which results in self-harm because we neglect the greater world, content to walk around being isolated. Okay, so if the thesis is that we all depend on love from others to survive, for our very survival, what about loving ourselves? Isn't that enough? Yeah, self-love is absolutely vital. But let's indulge me for a moment. I want to try something, if you don't mind. Please close your eyes if you're able and willing, just so you can imagine what it would feel like to love yourself fully and completely as we all strive to do. Imagine that. You've done it. You are all you need. And doesn't that feel great? Now, with your eyes closed, continue to imagine in this state of self-fulfillment, you are completely alone, existing in a void, no other life. Does anything shift in your spirit? Now, open your eyes, or just look around if they're already open, to realize you are actually in the world with others, many of whom love you in return. Do you feel another shift in spirit? It's important to love ourselves in order to be able to interact lovingly with others, I believe. And what's more, we all get only as good as we give. So yes, in the hospital, I'm the shepherd, I am, but I am also the sheep. We are always alternating between sheep and shepherd, giving and receiving care. That is the warp and the weft of the interdependent web of which we are all a part, which is our UU seventh principle, respect for that interdependent web. There is currently, for those of you who don't know, a proposed revision of our UU covenant, which includes this image, an image that depicts the lesson I'm talking about. Our current principles, including respect for the interdependence of existence, they're not abandoned but folded in, placed as circumambient strands around a web of sorts, held together by love at the center. Why is this image important? because it illustrates how we are to spin and strengthen and upkeep this web by understanding that love is not just important, but living our principles depends upon loving each other. I was just asked just yesterday, actually, about the theology of Unitarian Universalism. So, if theology is the study of the nature of the divine, and one's theology leads one to love the divine, each of us have to acknowledge that which we consider divine. I acknowledge a connection to the larger and profound divine that is the living energy that pervades all life, within and between us all, our interconnected web. So for me, the principles of interdependence and justice and equity and generosity and transformation and pluralism, they are divine. So UU theology strengthens and upkeeps this web by first recognizing the divine in each of us and in the world as we each understand it. We all understand it differently. And then supporting that divinity with the only thing that can support it: love. Love. The author, Brené Brown, I love her framing of this. She calls it loving wholeheartedly, even if it hurts. And sometimes it does. Living this theological imperative, it's not simple. It's not easy. Loving is even potentially harmful. One of the first learning assignments I was given when I was a ministerial intern years ago was I had to come up with my personal theology using a single concept. Well, the first concept that came to my mind was free hugs. Remember those signs? Free hugs? Yeah. Hugs, however, have the potential for harm, just as does love. Not everyone can easily give or receive hugs physically or love emotionally. There are considerations of consent involved with both. Unsolicited hugs and misguided attempts at loving can cause pain, even. And even with consent, we cannot accept that someone will hug back or love back with the same intensity, or at all, for that matter. That assignment for my personal theology was given in 2019, and I could not have foreseen that very soon thereafter, hugging another human being might severely sicken them and even be considered a malicious act. Couldn't even consider that. Therefore, I have since reconceived my personal theology a little bit, at least for now, we're always in process, as offering free spiritual hugs. The giving of love involves courageous, often difficult human connections, where we recognize the divinity in each other and the world, that we may provide free spiritual hugs, mindful of the needs of others. Spinning the web, however, involves this giving of love, as well as getting it in return. So how does that work? I'll tell you how it doesn't, by demanding it or expecting it. Actually, it's a trick question. The way to assure receiving love is to just repeat step one, giving love over and over and over. Liberating love liberates love. It won't always be returned, but only by loving others can we assure that it will ever be returned. And now not only will it often not be returned, but tragically, we are and will be confronted by its direct opposite when we give love, and that is hatred. In the spinning of the web, forms of hatred must be dismantled as well. How? By loving more and harder, in my opinion. And finally, a web is not static, but it's constantly rewoven. The strands of the web that connect us to the interdependence and the equity and the transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice through love, some of them will break on occasion. If all the strands are severed, then the web collapses. But the good news is, however, that if one or two of the strands break, the web may weaken, but it'll remain intact. And that is yet another reason we have to be ever diligent in constantly reweaving the web through love all the time. As the world is fighting wars, literal as well as ideological and moral wars that divide humanity more violently than I've seen in over half a century of life, as ties between friends and neighbors are severed by weapons of hate and fear, this web, the love-dependent web, will weaken. This country is confronting what will likely be one of our most challenging years in my lifetime, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. But I also absolutely know that the life we Unitarian Universalists aspire to, the life that all of humanity aspires to, is also entering our field of perception. It is. So it is incumbent upon each of us to spin as we've never spun before, with a level of courage that has heretofore been more elusive than we care to admit, to actualize the latter. So I regularly meet people who are understandably grouchy, given the pain and disease that inflict society. And like most people, they also have spurts of joy, albeit more infrequently. However, many of them, unfortunately, concern themselves less with finding joy in each moment than with the daily bombardment of hatred, anger, and fear. These people are often stuck in their rooms, connected to electronic devices, rendering them unable to leave their silos. Many of us, it is more than likely to make up for this complete lack of control and the powerlessness that seems to define every aspect of existence in this world, that many people often develop a guarded attitude that manifests as fear and even hatred. Just as I confronted this patient in the hospital with compassion, understanding they were trapped physically by their medical circumstances, we must confront even the meanest, grouchiest among us, understanding they too are being held hostage by much which is beyond their control. What if we could? What if we could find something, we may or we may not be able to, or we should try, find something that causes them to truly look back at us and say with the supreme sincerity of someone deeply grateful, I love you. Only if we task ourselves with spiritual care of each other by finding those things that can release entombed souls, that ease pain rather than perpetuate it, will we receive the love that we too depend on to survive. May we have the courage and strength to give love even in the most challenging circumstances. May we have the awareness to realize that we too depend on and deserve love, as well as the humility to accept it. May we confront the challenges of tomorrow, loving more courageously than the world has ever known. Does anyone have any Cheetos?